Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to another one of devCodeCamp's Alumni Spotlights. I'm Carl Peterson, devCodeCamp's social media producer. And whether you're listening on your favorite platform to listen to podcast or our YouTube video, I'm very excited you're here. And we have a good one. I say that every episode, and I mean it. It's a bad habit, but it's not filler conversation. It's for sure. By the end of this, I'm sure you're going to agree as well. So let's go ahead and get right into it with a two-part question, which is one, what is your name and when did you attend devCodeCamp?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Nick Tirnanich, and I attended devCodeCamp about 5.5, 6 years ago now. So kind of one of the newer classes, and it was a great experience for me. Challenging, but great. Yeah.
Sure. That's great, Nick. We'll get into that a little bit more in detail. I was curious what you're doing right now for work.
Yep. I'm a part of a DevOps consulting company in the Chicagoland area called Break Free Solutions. Been a great organization to work for. Kind of a smaller operation, which is kind of a good change for me in my career. But I'm also still dealing with larger clients as well, and a lot of it's DevOps optimization and kind of infrastructure, both legacy and in the cloud. Yeah.
Sure. So what does your typical work day look like? And it sounds like you have a little bit of a different day every day, but what's the high overview?
Yeah, generally it's one client at a time. And what we do is, depending on the ask for that specific client, it's primarily more so DevOps or cloud initiatives that client is undertaking. But every ask can be different from an organization or depending on the project. Sometimes it's heavy technical work or engineering or architecture work, where a lot of it is just getting our hands dirty, updating their infrastructure, automating it, optimizing it, getting into like a lot of Terraform code, for example, or just a lot of my core skills that I've learned, like Linux administration, that helps obviously in the cloud. A lot of obviously Jira and storyboard type of tools and tasks that I've used over the years, and is very still common in DevOps, and I think is being adopted more for kind of cloud infrastructure initiatives too. So yeah.
That's great. It definitely sounds I want to lean back on what I just said, which sounds like every day is different. And oh my gosh, yeah, it definitely sounds like every day is very, very different for you.
Yeah, it's good because it does have you continue to stretch yourself. Even people that have been in the cloud for as long as the cloud has been around, maybe even from the late 2000s. Some of the folks that I've worked with, but you're still learning different nuances to the client. So different frameworks, there are different tools, there are ways of doing things. Obviously, there's kind of a core skill set or core tools that you see more often than not. But it does you're on your toes to stay current still, without question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's always exciting, right? Better than doing the same thing every single day.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So Nick, thinking, let's go back a little here. I know you said about 5 years ago you attended. I was curious, what was the initial reason you decided to pursue code?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, at that time I was working in various kind of sales and business account management type of roles. So I got my first exposure to kind of a lot of technology. Long story short, at least on the job, kind of almost doing like BI type of reporting or financial services updates for accounts and vendors. And from there, also getting a little bit my hands into the startup world about a little bit over 10 years ago, when I was out on the East Coast, New York area, and a little bit in Milwaukee before I moved there. So it's kind of a combination of, man, I really need to get more technical, or I saw the need for it from someone who has been a business professional for a couple of years and kind of already starting to go more that technical route. Just even something like, SQL reports and business, like a BI aspect. And then just the fact that, a lot of the career path that I was on wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. I think learning code and getting more into technology and really expanding those hard skills opened up so many doors for me. You know, it really has, that weren't there at that time. Even though I was someone that had been around the block, and had big kind of corporate experience already in my early 30s, but that's where it really would took off with devCodeCamp. That I was able to have a little bit, maybe even a little bit of a base, or at least some exposure, but no prior experience whatsoever, at least for the most part, in real technical matters. And devCodeCamp really obviously took that to the next level in boot camp.
Well, that's always something great to hear. And we'll discuss the boot camp a little bit more this next question and onwards. But it's really great you saw that insight and were smart enough to take a leap on it, because you're definitely in the weeds now, which isn't a negative thing at all. It can also be a positive thing. So it's great that you have that knowledge now. Can you take me back to when you were going into the boot camp, devCodeCamp's boot camp? What was your mentality? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Can you walk me through that?
Sure. Yeah, I was definitely nervous, because at that time, being used to a steady paycheck, not being able to just kind of eat ramen anymore, at that certain age in my life, it was intimidating, because at that time, I think it was only strictly a full-time ask of the boot camp, where it was just 12 weeks where you're completely there. I had just enough money saved up to be able to take that leap, and I'm glad I did. But I was nervous because I didn't have any real previous experience in terms of hard coding and just overall computer science, and it was definitely more nerve-wracking than anything else for me, to be quite frank. Yeah.
Sure. No, yeah, that's totally an acceptable answer, because that's totally a fair and realistic feeling.
Right.
Yeah, things are a little different now, obviously. We have multiple options now. I was wondering if you kind of going all in a way, it kind of sounded like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, but did that help you succeed, do you think?
I think it most definitely did. Yes. It really was. I had to. I had to do it. It was one of those things, like I just had to do it. I mean, like, the whole failure was not an optional. That was true.
Sure. There's definitely,
I had to make it work. It might have not been pretty at times, but you have to make it work and stick it out.
Sure, there's definitely a fact behind having to make it work or nothing. It's great you did that.
Right.
So you talked about going in. What was your feelings coming out of graduation?
Well, getting out was definitely a relief too. Like, oh man, I'm finally over this stuff. And yeah, right, yeah. And there was a lot. It definitely got the best out of me. But I knew after the boot camp what maybe were my strengths and weaknesses. I knew my experience was a good strength, at least from having a lot of corporate experience in the past. And I think I leveraged some of the already prior kind of BI background that I had and data background. So I was probably one of the first, I think, first or second in my class to get an opportunity, which was really awesome, a big relief. Obviously that helps, but it was only, I think most of us within my class were only maybe 2, 3, 4 months that were graduating, and it was fairly relatively quickly.
Sure. If you could go back, would you do it all again, Nick?
Oh, absolutely. I really would. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, come on, we got courses. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, the thing, that's another thing that I have thought about in the past. If there was maybe almost like an abbreviated boot camp or a part-time one, where it was more the exception than the norm, but I did see and interact with students that had been doing IT work for many years, or at least had already one like truly technical job that just came back into the boot camp to kind of brush up on their skills or stay current. So that's something that I have seen, and I think that's a student that type of student's not really talked about too much, but I think there is a lot of benefit for some of us alums to maybe do that. I mean, maybe not do a full course, but something similar to that even. if there was an abbreviated course or something we could do part-time.
Sure. Yeah, we have students come back and do a different, focal point. We also have people who are currently developers needing to brush up on their skills. So there's definitely, a lot of talk about someone coming in with no coding experience or someone wanting
Right.
to launch their career from scratch, but those exist as well, all the time. What would you say your favorite part? Of course, things have changed a little bit, but from your
Sure.
perspective at that time, what would you say your favorite part of the course was, or the boot camp as a whole?
I would say probably the favorite was the exposure to different things from a computer science perspective. Like, obviously, 12 weeks is a short amount of time, but it is enough to get a very good foundation, and it's enough to get maybe that good junior dev role or that BA role or whatever it is. I would say for me, what mainly from a curriculum standpoint was just the different exposures to different sectors of computer science and information technology. That helped because then having that as a base later on in my career, or even after graduation, I knew where to brush up on. Where I'm like, hey, I'm still a little, at least a couple years ago, not so much anymore. Where it was like, oh, I was a little weak maybe in networking in the cloud. So now I would create projects or do projects, get certs or what have you, that expanded that, and I got much more experience in that. And now I'm an expert in stuff like that. So that was one thing that I really liked a lot of the camp, was the different exposure, even if it was fairly brief on some of them, but at least you got exposed to it.
That's actually a really great segue into what I'm about to ask. So at devCodeCamp, we don't only teach people how to code, we teach them how to be a developer. And we do that by implementing things starting day one with stand-ups, the review process, tons of things sprinkled in. From your roles out of devCodeCamp all the way up to the ones, as of current or earlier, with the actual, coding ability you have, but outside the actual coding ability you have, has there been any kind of preparation that devCodeCamp implemented in you that made you a better developer outside of coding that you still take advantage of today by chance?
Yes, I would say almost kind of I call them like the soft hard skills, kind of like, and I've gotten a lot, not better, but like you almost do it all the time now as a technologist because you don't know everything. But the ability to identify the issue or the problem at hand is number one. And I think devCodeCamp, you become a problem stater and problem solver. Like, you get good at asking the questions or identifying the problem and then almost reverse engineering or try to do research on that. Whether it is just Google searches or whether it's colleagues or even just sometimes, a book you might have on hand to look up, let me see how that is from a technical perspective. That's a big one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's huge, Nick. That's a great answer as well, because that's definitely learning to learn is a big part of the boot
It
camp.
is. It's very big. I would
It's-
almost say that's almost one of the main things, if not the main thing.
and
Learning to learn is a right way of saying it.
sure, and it's a big part of being a developer too.
Sure.
So there's absolutely a reason why that is, and that's a really great answer, and I'm glad that you got to benefit from that. So we've mentioned multiple times, it's been a few years now since attending devCodeCamp. Would you say all these years later, did devCodeCamp set you up for long-term success?
It absolutely did. It provided that good base, and exposure. But a lot of it also, a lot of it is just what you do with the curriculum and the projects you have. I continued still even to this day to develop. So a lot of it really is the ownership of that student or developer to just get better at your craft. It really is up to you. And I was someone that initially in the boot camp probably struggled for the first couple of weeks. It wasn't something that clicked with me or right away. It wasn't a natural per se. but I stuck it out and I worked hard, and the technical skills can come. And now all of that stuff, a lot of this technical stuff is second nature. But at first it wasn't, so when you're seeing people in your class that either have had prior coding experience or maybe even had a master's in computer science or what have you, or maybe you were just naturally gifted, that's where you have to persevere and work harder and just, kind of almost do a self-assessment of where you just need to get better and own up to it.
Sure, that's great advice. You mentioned you struggled the first little bit there. What was the thing that made you get over those hurdles?
I think it was just intangibles, like the things where it's like I had to, you just had to overcome. There wasn't like, it was a sink or swim situation for me at that point. And it's just kind of like, I'm either going to do this or figure it out, or or it was just a waste for me. And you can't quit, and I get it. Maybe some things aren't for everybody or whatever, but you just have to persevere, because I'd say a significant portion, at least from when I went, it was very, very common for someone to think maybe, to make excuses. Maybe this isn't for me, or this is too hard, but you just kind of keep going. And you know what? I've seen it happen where all of a sudden after a couple of weeks, there's a big jump where things start to click. You see other people that were really other students that were really ahead early on in the class, maybe because a lot of it was review or something. And all of a sudden, the ones that were maybe kind of the stragglers or ones that were a little bit more developing, all of a sudden they really took off by the end. That was something that I saw a couple of times, and I think that's not out of the realm of possibility for someone that maybe started off quote unquote slower.
Yeah, that's something we see all the time. Something just after a while clicks, but you're not going to get there unless you get there, So
Right.
That's also great advice. Nick, believe it or not, this has flown by. This is the last question for you here coming up.
Okay.
I can't believe it's already been as long as it's been. It feels like we've been talking for 2 minutes. So since you attended, when you attended, it was a physical location, devCodeCamp, and now we're 100% online, which is great because it opens up so much more potential for so many more people to launch their careers. I end every one of these with the same question, and I'm excited to hear your answer.
Sure.
If somebody was watching this or listening to this right now, interested or thinking about coming to devCodeCamp, what would you say to them?
I would say you have, if you're going to do it, you have to be 110% committed. Just be committed and just stick it out. Commit yourself, stick it out. Try to learn. Try to figure out the right questions to ask. Use the resources and the teachers on hand. From time to time, maybe ask someone, that IT friend, a little bit of advice or questions. But yeah, you just have to use the resources at your hand and just work through it. Just get it. There's really no secret. You just gotta do it and stick to it. Stick and stay.
Advice. There is no secret, especially because everybody's different, right? Everyone consumes knowledge differently, so there is no secret. That just is a snap of the fingers. That's the answer. But I think that was great advice overall. So that was fantastic, Nick. Like I said, that was the last question. Thank you so much for making time for us today. It's really great to watch your success. We're glad that you have had the career you've had, and so far and moving forward. And thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Carl, for your time.
Absolutely.
It's done so much for me. Yeah.
What was that?
It's done so much for me. It really has. So
well, that's great, Nick. Like I said, we love to see that. And thank you everybody else for listening and watching today. Like I said, it was going to be a good one. I say it every time, and it's never failed me yet. So Nick, thank you for doing most of the legwork here. And thank everybody for your time as well out there listening and watching. Once again, I'm Carl Peterson. Nick, thank you. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Yep. Have a good one.